The rain fell on Seattle with a relentless, metallic hiss, a sound that had become the soundtrack to Arthur's life. It wasn't the gentle, romantic drizzle of movies. It was a cold, needling downpour that seemed to seek out the gaps in a person's defenses. He sat in a circle of folding chairs in the sterile, beige-colored community room of the local library, the scent of industrial cleaner and damp wool hanging in the air. This was the divorce support system, a name he found bitterly ironic. There was no system, only a collection of broken parts. "Arthur? Would you like to share?" He looked up, startled from his reverie. The facilitator, a woman named Brenda with a permanently sympathetic tilt to her head, was smiling at him. Around the circle, the other casualties of failed marriages looked on with varying degrees of interest and exhaustion. "No," Arthur said, his voice a low rumble. "Not tonight." He was a man built for quiet spaces, an architect by trade, a man who found solace in clean lines and predictable structures. His own life, however, had become a ruin. His wife of 15 years, Isabel, had left him for a man she described as having more spark. The word echoed in his mind, hollow and cruel. As if their life together, a carefully constructed edifice of shared mornings, inside jokes, and a joint mortgage, was just damp tinder. His gaze drifted across the circle and landed on her. The new woman. She'd been coming for 3 weeks, but she hadn't spoken once. She was a study in contained fury. Her posture was ramrod straight, her hands clenched in her lap, knuckles white. Her hair, a dark, unruly cascade, seemed to defy the room's oppressive blandness. Her name was Clara, he'd learned during introductions. Clara, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. When the meeting finally, mercifully ended, Arthur made for the door, desperate for the impersonal chill of the rain. But a voice, sharp and laced with a tremor of anger, stopped him. "This is useless." Turned. Clara was standing there, her coat only half on, her eyes glistening not with tears, but with a raw, indignant fire. "Pardon me?" "This," she gestured vaguely at the dispersing group. "Talking in circles. Crying over spilled milk that's not just spilled, it's curdled and stinking up the whole damn kitchen." She shoved her other arm into her coat sleeve with a violent jerk. "It doesn't fix anything." Arthur, surprised by her vehemence, found himself nodding slowly. "No, it doesn't. But it's supposed to make you feel less alone." "Does it?" she challenged, her gaze piercing. "Do you feel less alone?" The directness of the question winded him. He looked at this woman, this stranger whose pain was a visible, almost physical force field around her, and he couldn't lie. "No." The flicker of something, recognition, perhaps, crossed her face. The defiance in her shoulders softened by a fraction. "I'm Clara." "Arthur." "I know." She managed a tight, fleeting smile. "You're the architect. You design things that stand up." The observation was so astute it hurt. He designed structures that could withstand earthquakes and hurricanes, yet his own foundation had crumbled to dust. Not everything, apparently. They walked out of the library together, the automatic doors sighing shut behind them. The rain had softened to a mist, haloed around the streetlights. "He took the dog," Clara said abruptly, her voice quieter now, stripped of its anger and revealing the hurt beneath. "A golden retriever named Barnaby. I didn't even fight for the china, Arthur. I fought for the dog. And I lost." She let out a shaky breath. "Who does that? Who uses a dog as a pawn?" Arthur thought of Isabel, who had taken the custom-made dining table he'd designed for her, the one with the intricate inlay of a maple leaf. A piece of his soul, sanded and varnished. "People reveal themselves in the exit strategies," he said quietly. Clara looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. Her eyes were the color of sea glass. "There's a diner around the corner," she said. "Their coffee tastes like motor oil, but it's hot. And they have pie." He hadn't planned on going anywhere but his empty, echoing apartment. The silence, there was a physical presence, a reminder of a life that was no longer his. "Pie sounds structural," he said. That earned him a genuine, if small, smile. "Structural," she repeated, nodding. "Okay then." And so they went. They sat in a cracked vinyl booth under the harsh fluorescent lights of the Skyline Diner, and over slices of cherry pie that were more red dye than fruit, they began to dismantle their wreckage. Not to rebuild, not yet, but just to clear the debris. Clara was a potter. She explained this as she stirred her coffee, her fingers, strong, capable, stained with traces of clay even now, wrapped around the thick ceramic mug. I create things from mud and fire, she said. I used to. Now I mostly just stare at the wheel, thinking about how my husband, Mark, told me my work was a nice hobby while he was having an affair with his corporate lawyer. A woman whose hands had never been dirty a day in her life. Arthur listened. He was good at listening. He learned that Clara's anger was a fortress, and behind its walls was a deep, profound sorrow. She had wanted children. Mark had kept delaying, until finally, during a brutal mediation session, he'd admitted he just didn't see her as mother material. The cruelty of it was so precise, so surgical, it took Arthur's breath away. In turn, he told her about Isabel. About how they'd met in college, how they'd built a life plank by plank, dream by dream. He told her about the slow, insidious silence that had grown between them, a silence he'd mistaken for comfort, for stability. He told her about the spark. A spark is what starts a fire, Clara said, her voice low and fierce. It's also what burns everything down. He didn't want a spark. He wanted an explosion. Their meetings at the diner after the support group became a ritual. Tuesdays and Thursdays. The architecture of their recovery. They never called it that, but that's what it was. They were forensic analysts of their own failed relationships, picking through the evidence, trying to understand where the fatal cracks had appeared. One Tuesday, Arthur didn't show up at the diner. Clara waited for 20 minutes, a knot of unfamiliar anxiety tightening in her stomach. This was new, this concern for someone outside the all-consuming orbit of her own pain. She found his number in the support group's email chain and called. His voice was thick, hollow. She's selling the house. The one I designed for us. The buyer wants to put up vinyl siding. Clara didn't laugh. She understood. It wasn't about the siding. It was about the final, casual erasure of his vision, his love, his history. Give me your address, she said. An hour later, she was on his doorstep, holding a bag containing a bottle of expensive bourbon and 2 terracotta plant pots she had thrown that afternoon, still rough and raw from her hands. Arthur's apartment was a testament to a life interrupted. It was neat, but the emptiness was profound. Blueprints were rolled neatly in a stand, a single, sleek sofa faced a blank wall where a TV might have gone, and the only personal touch was a framed photograph of a half-built bridge, its lines elegant and strong. He opened the door, looking wrecked. His usually tidy hair was disheveled, and his eyes were red-rimmed. Vinyl siding is a crime against humanity, Clara announced, holding up the bourbon. We're going to drown our sorrows and then we're going to plant something in these pots. Something that grows. That night, they got quietly, mournfully drunk. They didn't talk much about the divorces. Instead, Arthur showed her his blueprints, his voice gaining strength as he explained the load-bearing walls of a library, the graceful curve of a pedestrian bridge. Clara told him about the alchemy of glaze, how minerals and heat could create colors that no name could properly capture. They planted basil seeds in the pots at 2 a.m., their fingers brushing in the dark, rich soil. It was the first time they had touched, a simple, mundane contact that sent a current of something warm and startling through the cold numbness that had encased them both. The seasons turned. The relentless rain of winter gave way to the tentative, cherry-blossomed spring. Their friendship was now a solid, reliable structure. They were each other's first call. Arthur helped Clara move her kiln into a new, sun-drenched studio space she'd rented with her share of the settlement. Clara dragged Arthur on hikes, forcing his architect's eyes to look up from his drawings and see the organic, untamable beauty of the world, the way trees found ways to grow around rock. They celebrated small victories. The day Clara sold a set of her vases to a gallery in Portland. The day Arthur won a prestigious commission for a new art center. They were healing not in a linear, predictable way, but in fits and starts, with setbacks and surprising leaps. It was on one of these hikes, standing on a bluff overlooking the Puget Sound, the water a shimmering sheet of silver under the sun, that the axis of their world shifted. Clara was talking about a new firing technique, her hands animated, the sun catching the silver threads in her dark hair. Arthur wasn't listening to the words, he was watching the life in her. The way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, the confident set of her shoulders, so different from the tense, furious woman he'd met months ago. He saw her strength, her resilience, her breathtaking creativity. He saw the woman who had pulled him from the abyss, not with pity, but with pie and bourbon and terracotta pots. "Clara," he said, interrupting her. She turned, her sentence trailing off. She saw the look on his face, a look of such profound, unguarded wonder that her breath caught. He didn't say anything else. He simply reached out, his hand, the hand that drew lines that became buildings, cupping her cheek. His thumb stroked the arch of her cheekbone, a question. Her eyes widened, and for a heart-stopping moment, he thought he had misread everything, shattered their perfect, fragile architecture. Then she leaned into his touch. Her eyes fluttered shut, and she let out a soft, shuddering sigh. He bent his head and kissed her. It was not a kiss of fiery passion, not the spark that Isabel had craved. It was something else entirely. It was a kiss of homecoming. It was solid and deep and real. It tasted of salt from the sea air and the faint, sweet hint of her lip balm. It was the feeling of two ruins having carefully cleared the ground and laid a new, stronger foundation, finally recognizing that the most beautiful thing they could build was together. When they broke apart, they were both trembling. The world around them, the sound, the sky, the towering evergreens, seemed to have sharpened into hyperreality. Clara's sea-glass eyes were full of tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of awe, of terror, of dawning, brilliant hope. "Arthur," she whispered, his name a prayer on her lips. "I know," he said, his forehead resting against hers. "I'm scared too." "What if we break this?" she asked, voicing the fear that hung between them. This thing, this beautiful, unexpected thing, was the only solid ground they had found in years. Arthur took her hands in his, linking their fingers. He looked from their joined hands to her eyes, his gaze steady and sure. "Then we'll rebuild." The beginning of their love was a cautious, tender thing. They moved slowly, terrified of the weight of their own histories. Their first official date was a nerve-wracking affair, full of awkward pauses and self-conscious laughter. It felt strangely like going backwards, from the profound intimacy of shared pain to the simple, terrifying vulnerability of romantic possibility. But the foundation was there, and it was strong. They learned each other in this new light. Arthur discovered that the hollow of Clara's throat was a perfect place to rest his lips when he needed comfort. Clara learned that the way Arthur hummed absently while he worked was a sound that filled her with a deep, quiet joy. They built new rituals. Sunday morning pancakes. Arguments over the correct way to load a dishwasher. Lazy evenings where he would sketch and she would wedge clay, existing in a comfortable, productive silence. The past, however, did not simply vanish. It arrived in the form of a text message to Clara from Mark. "Heard you're seeing someone. The quiet architect from your little pity group? Guess you needed a project." The words were a poison dart, expertly aimed at her deepest insecurities. Was that what this was? Was she just another project for Arthur, the fixer? Was he her rebound, a safe, stable man to lean on? Simultaneously, Arthur ran into Isabel at a materials supplier. She was with her new husband, the man with the spark. He was loud, wearing a flashy watch, his arm possessively around Isabel's waist. She looked at Arthur with a mixture of pity and condescension. "I'm glad you found someone, Arthur. She must be very grounding for you." Grounding? The word felt like a diminishment, as if what he and Clara had was mundane, a stepping stone, not a destination. That night, the ghost of their exes sat at the dinner table with them. Clara was withdrawn, picking at her food. Arthur was quiet, his answers clipped. "He texted me," Clara finally said, her voice small. Arthur looked up, his eyes dark. "Isabel was there today. With him." The air grew thick with unspoken fears. The old wounds, not fully healed, throbbed anew. She said you were grounding, Clara said, a bitter edge to her voice. Mark said I needed a project. Arthur put his fork down carefully. And what do you think, Clara? The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. I think, she began, her voice trembling. I'm terrified that we're just two broken people using each other as a life raft. And that when we finally reach the shore, we won't need each other anymore. It was the truth, the fear that had been festering beneath the surface of their new happiness. Arthur stood up and walked around the table. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. They were cold. Clara, look at me. He waited until her tear-filled eyes met his. A life raft is a temporary vessel. It's meant to be abandoned. What we're building, it's not a raft. I'm not helping you fix your broken pieces, and you're not my safe harbor. We are building a cathedral. Together. Stone by stone. And it's not based on who we were with them or the pain they caused. It's based on Tuesday nights at a shitty diner and basil plants at 2 a.m., and the way you look when you pull a new piece from the kiln, and the way I feel when I see my blueprints through your eyes. He took a deep breath. I am not in love with you because of my divorce. I am in love with you in spite of it. I love your hands, your fire, your strength. I love the woman who built herself back from nothing, not the one who was broken. The dam broke. Clara crumpled forward, her head resting on his shoulder, her body shaking with sobs of relief and release. He held her, his own eyes wet, rocking her gently. They had faced the ghost of their pasts and, together, they had banished them. A year later, on the anniversary of the day they'd planted the basil seeds, Arthur took Clara to the site of the new arts center he had designed. It was nearly complete, a stunning structure of glass and reclaimed wood that seemed to grow out of the landscape itself. He led her through the main hall, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. Light streamed in through the massive windows, illuminating the floating dust motes like gold leaf. I have something for you, he said, his voice echoing slightly. He led her to the center of the room, where a single object stood covered by a cloth. With a gentle pull, he revealed it. It was a sculpture. A collaborative piece he had secretly commissioned. The base was a pillar of cool, smooth, gray-veined marble, carved with the precise, elegant lines of an architectural drawing, the blueprint for a strong, beautiful foundation. Rising from the marble, as if emerging from it, was a form of fiery, swirling, impossibly beautiful ceramic. It was Clara's work, a form of deep blues and golds, organic and passionate, twisting and curling around the structured marble, not confined by it, but elevated by it. The two materials, stone and clay, structure and art, were inextricably linked, each making the other more complete, more beautiful. Clara stared, her hand flying to her mouth. She saw it immediately. It was them. The architecture of us. Arthur didn't get down on one knee. He simply turned to her, taking both her hands in his. Clara, he said, his voice steady and clear in the sun-drenched space. We started with the rubble of other people's choices. We cleared it away, together. We laid a new foundation, one made of honesty and pie and shared silence. We built a life, a beautiful, resilient, unexpected life. I don't want to just build a life with you. I want to build a future. Will you marry me? Tears streamed freely down Clara's face, but they were the sweet, clean tears of a long journey ended and a new, glorious one beginning. She looked from the sculpture, the perfect representation of their souls, back to the man who saw her, all of her, and loved her not for being fixed, but for being whole in her own unique way. Yes, she said, her voice strong and sure. Yes, Arthur. Let's go build our cathedral. And as they kissed in the light-filled hall, a space he had designed and she would fill with her art, the past was finally, completely, just a memory. The future was a blueprint, waiting to be drawn, together.